I invite the forum to hear the voluntary national review by India. And I now invite this forum to watch a short video, after which I invite His Excellency Arvind Panagariya, Vice Chairperson of NITI Aayog of India, to make the presentation.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. These words describe the values of India and ancient civilization. They imagine a world where no one is left behind, where universal peace is possible, poverty is vanquished, and hope springs eternal. Modern India, resurgent, full of aspirations, determined to eliminate poverty, pursuing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, collective effort and inclusive growth for all. India has made giant strides in the past few years. The economy is booming, millions of jobs have been added, and the numbers of those living in poverty have been halved. India is constantly innovating to include more citizens in its relative economic prosperity. The country pioneered self-help groups that brought thousands of women into the banking system. Under Prime Minister Modi, millions more opened bank accounts. These accounts are now being used to support India's social security system, offering job guarantees, pension and insurance. India desires dignity for all citizens. The Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or Clean India mission has led to better cleanliness and construction of millions of toilets. It has made it possible for many adolescent girls in particular to stay in school. Comprehensive health services are offered through the National Health Mission. A tiered referral system connects citizens with quality health services from the grassroots up. Combating hunger is crucial. And India's public distribution system guarantees food security to 800 million Indians. The importance of women in Indian society is reflected in the way government programs prioritize their rights. Housing loans for less, issuing ration cards and cooking gas connection in women's names. Gender equality is central to India's vision for the future. 33% of seats for elected heads of the village-level self-government institutions are reserved for women. Further, India is always looking for ways to leverage the power of women by providing them with better education and skills. India's commitment to inclusive, sustainable development extends to a foreign policy decision. India, under Prime Minister Modi, has led the development of International Solar Alliance, the Mangalyaan, India's mission to Mars, the South Asia satellite, India's gift to the region, and the recent launch of 104 satellites by ISRO illustrate the nation's commitment to being a responsible global citizen.
सभी सुखी हो, सभी निरोगी हो, कल्याणकारी देखें, किसी को भी किसी प्रकार का दुख न हो.
And now I invite the forum to hear the voluntary national review. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right. So you may have noticed that the film does not speak in terms of the SDGs, and some background on that very quickly. So even before the SDGs began to be negotiated, a network of national programs had existed in India. These programs already captured virtually all the goals that are now embedded in the SDGs. It's not pure coincidence India had negotiated heavily and pushed for some of these goals when the SDGs were negotiated. And therefore, what the SDGs do is what the national programs of India do. Therefore, India's approach to implementing SDGs has been in terms of the implementation of the national goals. A major advantage of this approach is that national programs have greater resonance with the people. There is also greater ownership since the programs are seen as homegrown. We have also, and that is what we have tried to capture in the film that you just saw. My presentation will touch on three areas. I'll first describe the role of the stakeholders. Next, I will discuss the progress towards the 7 SDGs we are discussing. And finally, I will conclude. The 5 sets of major stakeholders: government, civil society, business, academia, and citizens. One by one, I shall describe their role. At the national level, we have a very dynamic Speaker of the Parliament who has been deeply engaged. She has herself actually organized several forums on the SDGs. At the Niti Aayog, which I had as the Vice Chairman of the institution, Prime Minister being the Chairman of the institution, this is the implementing agency. And it is closely monitoring progress. It is also the coordinating agency. There is also at the national level, we have the Office of the Chief Statistician. We have the Chief Statistician present here, Mr. T.C.A. Anant. So Mr. Anant actually very carefully prepares the indicators to be monitored. And he also advises us how we should go about it. He is of the firm opinion that we should rely on measurable outcome indicators and not rely on perception-based indicators that often get derived from the surveys. Second, we also have a very deep involvement of the subnational levels. These are the states of the country. And as you would see in the slides, several of the states have their own separate programs. We have we have one of the representatives of the state with us in the delegation as well here from Andhra Pradesh. And you would see that Assam in the northeast has a 2030 plan in the light of the SDGs. Gujarat in the west has the campaign, I am aware of SDGs, are you? And Andhra Pradesh in the south has come up with the detailed agenda titled Achieving Sustainable Development Goals 2030. We also actually have had another level of consultation at the village level, panchayats as they are called, the governing bodies at the local level in the villages, and there has been consultation at that level as well. I believe our Panchayati Raj secretary here is also somewhere present today with us. Other key stakeholders, civil society groups, Niti Aayog and states have worked closely with them. Corporate sector, a large number of industry associations, both at the national and subnational levels, sometimes even at the local levels, have been engaged. Our academics have been engaged. Niti Aayog runs a program called Samavesh, which actively engages with the universities and colleges in this matter. Next, I turn to the very brief discussion on the progress India has achieved in the 7 SDGs. Begin with SDG 1, which in our view is really the most important SDG for India, poverty elimination. India is of the firm belief that the key instrument for eradicating poverty is rapid growth, and we have certainly focused our efforts on that. I'm pleased to say that today India is the fastest growing major economy in the world. It is currently growing at 7.5%, and it has also grown in the last 15 years in real dollar terms at about 9% a year, and that has, of course, helped us in two ways. It created gainful employment for people and therefore empowered people directly, but it has also given the government ever increasing revenues to carry out the very large-scale social programs. And as I go, I will be describing these social programs for you. These have included things like housing for all, road connectivity for all the villages and habitations, electricity for all, employment guarantee for 100 days for one person each rural household, financial inclusion. India has expanded at the fastest pace ever anywhere in the world. The bank accounts, about 53% of Indian women independently have their own bank accounts. All this has translated, of course, also in very rapid decline in poverty. Since 1993, the poverty rate in India has been cut by more than half. SDG 2, very closely related, hunger and improving nutrition. Here, National Food Security Program has reached 800 million people who are covered for subsidized grains. 100 million children are provided every day midday meals, which are warm midday meals. Major drive is also underway to raise farm productivity and double the farmers' income. SDG 3 on health and well-being, all health indicators such as the IMR, MMR, life expectancy have shown steady improvement across all states, not only just at the national level. Institutional deliveries now cover nearly 80% of our childbirths. Below poverty line households are being progressively covered for hospitalization up to about 100,000 rupees per year. I next turn to the goal 5, SDG 5. This clearly is the key. We think this is really the most important SDG as well, along with the elimination of poverty. And so India gives special importance to this. A major program, Save the Girl Child, Educate the Girl Child, has been launched by the Prime Minister, and you saw something about that in the film. Gender gap in education is being steadily bridged. Maternity benefit program covers women for the 6 months of the delivery. And we at Niti Aayog actually have a program called Women Transforming India, where we really identify the women who have played transformational role and honor them every year. We have this year's program already has about 5,000 impeccable entries from Women Transforming India all around the country. Infrastructure, industry, and innovation, that of course is an essential ingredient in growth. Roads, railways, ports, energy, all of these are seeing very, very rapid and steady progress. Make in India program launched by the Prime Minister is intended to improve the performance of the industry. Within the last 3 years, India has received about $161 billion in foreign direct investment. On innovation, my own institution, Niti Aayog, has launched a major program to change the ecosystem called the Atal Innovation Mission. And it is creating the tinkering labs in schools all around the country, and also incubation centers are being promoted by the Atal Innovation Mission. Ocean, seas, and marine resources, there is a major drive in India towards blue revolution. Coastal ocean monitoring and prediction system has been put in place. There is a national oil spill disaster contingency plan, and India is also embarking on port-led development. Last one of the goals on resources. India has undertaken major tax reforms within the last 3 years. You may have heard the goods and services tax, the GST, a long-drawn negotiation across 29 states of India and across the various parties at the national level. Major reform has just been completed, and there is a direct benefit transfers to plug leakages in our social programs. The Aadhaar, about which you might know, the biometric identity given to about 1.1 billion people in the country, which has now become the basis of all our social disbursement of our social programs through the direct benefit transfer, and that has helped eliminate ghost cards, ghost beneficiaries, multiple benefits to the same set of beneficiaries, etc. The CSR is done by the corporate sector, of course. 2% of the profits have to be spent on social programs. Finally, I conclude, India reaffirms the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Developed countries have an essential obligation to provide financial assistance to developing countries and cooperate in areas like curbing illicit financial flows. India will continue to pursue the implementation of the SDG agenda through close collaboration among different levels of government and with active participation of stakeholders. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Arvind Panagarija, Vice Chairperson of NITI Aayog of India, for the complete presentation. Now I open the floor to an interactive dialogue with the presenting country. Before I give the floor, I remember that we have only 2 minutes per speaker. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guatemala. You have the floor.
Buenos días,
Good morning, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President. We wish to thank India for that presentation. It was a very comprehensive one. We'd just like to take a few seconds to put a question to you regarding SDGs 7 and 13. We take it that India has subsidies for fossil fuels. We'd like to ask what specific steps you are considering in order to eliminate these gradually, thinking of achieving these specific SDGs and considering also the challenges when it comes to climate change and adaptation and mitigation. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Guatemala for his presentation. Now, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I congratulate the Indian delegation for its excellent presentation and for showing us incredible India. The film was great. Just one question. Like India, Ethiopia is a federal state. So with the purpose of taking a lesson, let me ask the involvement of subnational and local governments in the VNR and SDG implementation process. Let me also ask, how is the coordination among the various levels of administrations? Once again, I congratulate the Indian delegation for the comprehensive presentation. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank your question, and now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belarus. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to thank India for this report, which demonstrates their full commitment by India to implement SDGs and Agenda 2030. Given the size of the country and the size of the challenges that stand before India, we note that the Indian colleagues are putting together a very sleek and precise mechanism to deal with the challenges of sustainable development. You have a national institution in your country which coordinates the work on the SDGs, and you're doing work to implement 2030. You've had parliamentary hearings to deal with those issues and how to overcome the challenges that you have. Belarus shares the approach of India to bring in all interested stakeholders into the process of implementing the SDGs. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the following question. What are your approaches, since you're a big country, how do you get the statistical indicators together to monitor whether you are implementing the SDGs? How do you approach that? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Belarus for her intervention. And now I invite His Excellency Arvind Panagarija, Vice Chairperson of NITI Aayog of India, to briefly respond to the question from the floor. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll answer the first question, and second one will be answered by Mr. Jain to my right, and the one from Belarus will be answered by my chief statistician. On fossil fuel, and my grateful thanks to all the delegates who have provided fantastic feedback. Much appreciated. Glad that our presentation has been well received. On fossil fuel subsidies, we have made a lot of progress in cutting these. We have no subsidies left on petrol or diesel. They are actually quite heavily taxed. We also have a cess on coal. However, we still have some fossil fuel subsidies which are political challenges because farmers are subsidized on electricity, for example. Fertilizer requires certain inputs which are subsidized as well. But these are challenges we have to meet. But India also has, as you saw in the film, a major program for renewable energy, which in the medium to long run is going to lead to a huge shift out of the fossil fuels. Our target for 2022 is about 175 gigawatt of renewable energy. So Prime Minister is very committed to this cause, and he also, as a result, started this International Solar Alliance. And so we are certainly committed, but some challenges remain on eliminating entirely the fossil fuel subsidies. Thank you, Mr. Jain.
Thank you very much. Regarding the involvement of the subnational governments and also the local governments, I wish to tell you that now the subnational governments are keenly involved in the policy making of the Government of India. In fact, we do have the subgroup of the chief ministers being formed by the Prime Minister, who give their recommendations, and we draw a lot of recommendations from them to frame the national policies. Now we have the cooperative and competitive federalism. The states are really competing with each other in a very healthy way. In fact, recently we had a conference of all the chief secretaries of all the 29 states and the union territories, where our own Prime Minister also participated for 2.5 hours, where SDGs were also discussed, and some of the states made their presentations. Most of the states do have their cells opened on SDGs or the centers of excellence. In fact, they are doing a lot of progress, and they have drawn their own action plans. We conducted a lot of, about 16 national consultations at Delhi, as well as three consultations at the regional levels, where the states and the academia, civil society, as well as research organization, and the officials of the state governments, as well as universities, and also are being, in fact, associated. At the subnational levels also, the panchayats are being involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just be brief in responding to the question by our distinguished colleague from Belarus. Measurement of the SDGs has been a very important element of India's approach to SDGs right from the very beginning. And We have built upon our advantages. We've already had a very strong statistical system with a very strong capacity for surveys. Those will be continuing, but for purposes of SDGs, we've embarked on a major effort to make sure that all the schemes and programs which were outlined in our presentation are in fact being implemented with clear monitorable indicators and outcomes. These outcome data is being collected through administrative resources of the programs, are also being compiled as part of our SDG reporting agenda. We, in our national consultations on the VNR and SDG implementation with local bodies and states, discuss the indicators and reporting of outcomes as part of the consultations being carried out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank His Excellency Arvind Panagarija, Vice Chairperson of Niti Aayog of India, for the presentation, and I also thank the delegation for their valuable contribution. I will now briefly pause the meeting to allow for the podium to be rearranged in order to take up the next voluntary national review on our program of work. Now I invite the forum to hear the voluntary national review by Maldives. It is my honor to invite His Excellency Abdullahi Majid, Minister of State for Environment and Energy of Maldives, to make the presentation. You have the floor, Mr.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning. It gives me great pleasure to present this August Assembly the first voluntary national review on the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals in the Maldives. Without a doubt, the 2030 Agenda is an ambitious one, particularly for a small island developing state such as the Maldives. It is an indivisible agenda, and it is a testament to the determined political will of international community. I wish to assure the global community the importance Maldives accords to the Sustainable Development Agenda. It is enshrined in our Constitution, and the government of Maldives is committed to mainstreaming the elements of sustainable development in its plans, policies, and strategies. Mr. President, the voluntary national review of Maldives to the HLPF 2017 will voice out the challenges faced by Maldives as a small island developing state and the efforts made towards overcoming these challenges through innovation, strategic long-term policies, and collaborative decision-making processes. We recognize that both innovation and participation of various stakeholders is critical, particularly given the cross-cutting nature of the SDGs. The implementation process of the 2030 Agenda in Maldives is built upon the successful implementation of the Millennium Development Goals in the country. I am proud to say that Maldives is the first country in South Asia which attained MDG plus status. We consider the 2030 Agenda as a continuation of our efforts under the MDGs. We remain committed to consolidate the gains made through the MDG process and intensify our efforts in areas where progress has been slower. In this vein, additional efforts have to be made in areas such as empowering women, strengthening mechanisms of good governance and justice, minimizing economic disparity, and sustainable consumption and production in order to consolidate the gains made in health, education, water and sanitation, energy infrastructure, climate change, and marine resources. Maldives has already initiated work and thus far have been given keen attention to promoting a conducive environment for the implementation of SDGs, including through the institution of adequate coordination and governance mechanism. As such, a National Ministerial Coordination Committee has been formed to provide policy guidance and feedback from different sectors at ministerial level and to ensure the integration of socio-economic and environmental aspects of the global goals. The Technical Committee for the SDGs implementation was formed with representatives from various government offices and state agencies who will provide technical support, expertise, and knowledge from their respective sectors. Maldives recognizes the importance of stakeholder engagement and participation in the substantial realization of SDGs. Therefore, emphasis has been made on creating awareness and engaging stakeholders through the implementation process. Focused awareness sessions are planned for the third quarter of this year for the general public, including parliamentarians, local councillors, and the judiciary, as well as NGOs. With the completion of stocktaking of available data by the National Bureau of Statistics, commencing the work of identifying national priorities is currently in progress. Identification of national priorities for SDG targets will be made through a process of consultations with implementing agencies as well as input from other development partners. Development of a monitoring framework is planned for the last quarter of 2017. The framework will be developed to monitor and report the achievements of the SDGs targets in the implementation process. The development of this framework will, however, require technical assistance and financial support. Mr. President, given the unique vulnerabilities faced as a low-lying island nation, Maldives require financial and technical support from its international development partners. The lack of capacity, necessary equipment, and modern tools, particularly in the area of data collection and management, remain as major hurdles in the implementation process. Mr. President, before I conclude, I would like to once again reaffirm the commitment of Maldives to the global goals and in this respect remain devoted to the transparent follow-up and review of the implementation process. Finally, I will conclude with a video presentation depicting the success and status of Sustainable Development Agenda in the Maldives. It will focus on the areas of climate change, building resilient infrastructure, including the provision of safe drinking water and improved sanitation and energy, universal health care, and education. I thank you for your attention.
What comes to your mind when we say Maldives? It could be the white sandy beaches, the crystal clear waters, the turquoise lagoons, or maybe the peaceful tropical islands where you can forget about everything else. Well, there's more to it than that. Do you know that there are about 400,000 people dispersed over 186 islands, of which there are less than 1,000 people living in 116 of them? Can you believe that the islands are just 1 meter above mean sea level? So imagine the challenges the country faces every day. Traveling, clean water, electricity, health, social issues, education, and even a simple variability in climate could lead to a devastating consequences on the islands and its people. So how is the country surviving, you may ask? To tell you the truth, it's not easy. And in fact, it's getting harder to mitigate from these global impacts. Still, the country has made these unique challenges as opportunities and continues in laying the groundwork to achieve sustainable development goals. Not a single day passes without Maldivians reflecting and contemplating how naive are those still believing there is no climate change, and them asking, is it really affecting countries? Of course it is. What's happening to Maldives is the unfortunate evidence of these threats. And the people of Maldives are trying whatever it takes to prevent these consequences as we speak. To reduce the vulnerabilities of the island communities while enhancing the environmental sustainability and economic and physical resilience, the government has initiated the Climate Resilient Safer Island concept. We are making efforts to improve coastal protections, and reliable communication systems such as VHF has been established to reduce impact from extreme weather events. People are being made more aware of the energy efficiency, and clean energy products are being implemented across the country. Access to better sanitation through sewerage networks in a sustainable manner is a high priority. Clean water and water security is being made possible through establishment of desalination plants, piped water networks, rainwater harvesting systems, and integrated water resource management system. It is a painstaking task to provide essential services to all the islands, especially the ones which are less populated. Hence, housing provisions through state-allocated funds and incentives, in combining with other financial models such as the developer financing, will be given to small communities voluntarily willing to move to larger islands with resilient infrastructure and better services. This has impacted the isolated and vulnerable communities in a positive manner with drastic improvements on their social and economic condition. The country currently has a total of 112 schools, where more than 35 schools have less than 100 students. Imagine the difficulty to retain qualified teachers in such cases. Through virtual classroom setups and with the use of the ICT, the country is now able to provide quality education to all students and efficient training facilities for teachers. Not a day goes by without dealing with social issues, and it is challenging, especially for a country that is geographically dispersed like Maldives, to address these problems. Through community social groups in each island, the country has established better coordination among various agencies within the island, providing awareness programs on various social issues. There's no doubt for generations, fishing has been the lifeline of this country and its people. Thus far, this continues to be the main source of food security in the country and is self-sufficient. Maldivian tuna products fetch higher prices in the international market due to its sustainability practices. The country has come up with a mobile application called Care to improve transparency and traceability of the fisheries products. The system allows record fish catchers to provide information to fishing vessels on weather conditions, potential fishing zones, purchases, and positions of anchored fish aggregating devices. Recent years has shown a drastic improvement in the health situation of the Maldives, a major factor being the introduction of the universal health insurance scheme known as Asanda. This has enhanced the well-being of communities throughout the country. Transportation between islands is one main challenge in accessing to the proper healthcare within the atolls. However, the introduction of the sea ambulance services has resulted in better coordination of referral cases, and also it showed tremendous improvement in timely access to healthcare services within the atolls. This service is also a supplement to the health insurance scheme, which covers the entire Maldivian population. Additionally, the government of Maldives closely coordinated with state-owned enterprise to implement a product to establish Asanda, accepted pharmacies in all inhabited islands. The people of Maldives are ready to battle all these challenges and build resilience of communities to promote prosperity for this small island state. Maldives has taken great strides in achieving sustainable development. Innovative solutions to our unique challenges is the only way for survival and prosperity of the people. This is a costly affair. Technical and financial support from domestic and international partners is critical to successfully implement the SDGs. Collaborative efforts among national agencies, the private sector, and the civil society and the development partners is essential to achieve the ambitious global goals. The government is committed to attain inclusive and sustainable development. It is committed to ensure that no one is left behind.
I thank His Excellency Abdullahi Mahid, Minister of State for Environment and Energy of Maldives, for the presentation. I now open the floor for an interactive dialogue with the presenting country. Before I give the floor to the first speaker, I will once again remind delegation to kindly limit their intervention to 2 minutes. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. All protocol observed. We would like to thank Maldives for the informative presentation. We congratulate Maldives for undertaking the voluntary national review at this second high-level political forum on sustainable development. As a fellow small island developing state and member state of AOSIS, Singapore knows full well the significant challenges facing Maldives, particularly those arising from climate change, given that Maldives is an archipelago of coral atolls. It is no wonder then that Maldives has been front and center on the issue of climate change. We thank Maldives and His Excellency Minister of State Abdullahi Majid personally for leading AOSIS and ensuring the concerns of small island developing states are not neglected as we seek to address climate change and strive towards sustainable development. We commend Maldives for the progress previously made on the MDGs and now on the SDGs. We have a question. We note that Maldives' economic and social well-being are inextricably linked to its natural environment, particularly its marine environment resources, with fisheries and tourism being key pillars of its economy, and given the critical importance of sustainably managing these resources, we would like to know more about how Maldives goes about localizing and internalizing the SDGs across its archipelago of nearly 1,200 islands. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Singapore for his presentation. Now, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belize. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. Mr. President, I wish to congratulate the Republic of Maldives for the excellent presentation, and importantly for their ongoing efforts to entrench the global goals into their national development plans and budgetary processes. Mr. President, there are many parallels between the Maldives and the Belize experience, most conspicuously the importance attached to consultation and socialization of the new agenda, changing policymakers' mindset to think long-term and cross-sectorally, and the importance of a robust framework to support the continued alignment of national priorities with the global agenda. At the same time, we see common challenges to implementation, and I wish to highlight 3 in particular. The first is establishing a data analysis system for monitoring and evaluation that we could maintain, recognizing our limited capacity and human resources. The second is developing a prioritization framework to determine our most pressing development needs and then the resources to meet those needs. This leads to the third challenge of ensuring adequate, predictable, and sustainable resources when our fiscal space is constrained. Our domestic private sector is too small, as is our tax base, and the terms of access to financial markets are prohibitive. Mr. President, Belize wishes to encourage the high-level political forum to reflect upon these SIDS-specific challenges and help us identify opportunities or good practices that could be applied to overcome these challenges. It would be useful to hear from the various stakeholder participants on the role they could play in partnering with SIDS in this regard. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Belize for her presentation. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Comoros. You have the floor.
Bonjour. J'aimerais tout d'abord.
First of all, I would like to commend the government of the Maldives for their excellent leadership in the Statistician group. I also like to thank and commend the delegation here as well for their excellent presentation. As a small island state, my question is the following. How is it in the Maldives? How did you balance the SDGs by setting priorities? Because you're aware that for SIDS, the priority would be to put climate change 13, to put that before all the others. So how do you balance them all? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Comoro for his intervention. Now, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Norway would also like to congratulate the Maldives for the comprehensive national report, one of the first from small island development states. We commend the Maldives for the considerable progress in areas of eradicating extreme poverty, achieving universal education and healthcare, as showcased in the very interesting video. Like the Maldives, most of Norway's resources come from the oceans. The Norwegian government white paper on oceans gives special priority to 3 areas: sustainable use and blue growth, clean and healthy oceans, and the role of blue economy in our development policy. We plan to host a side event on oceans during the high-level week of the General Assembly, and would be happy to share the white paper with you all. So we fully understand the importance of oceans for the small island states, and it would be interesting to learn more about the role of oceans and how it's integrated into the sustainable development plans of the Maldives. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway for his statement. Now, I give the floor to Scientific and Technological Community Major Group. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, distinguished delegates. My name is Reginald Vachon, and I am here representative of the Scientific and Technological Community, STC, composed of ISSC, the International Social Science Council, the International Council for Science, ICSU, and the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, WFEO. Allow me to pose questions on behalf of several constituencies within the coordination mechanism of the major group and other shareholders. Question: how is the government of the Maldives ensuring efforts to collect disaggregated data on people in vulnerable situations and marginalized communities and groups to ensure realizing the 2030 agenda for them? What groups do you include in this disaggregation? 2, SDGs call for strengthening community-level institutions and participatory decision-making, including through improving capacity of different stakeholders and rights holders at the national level. Are there institutional processes in place to engage different stakeholders at national level to engage in and validate the national reviews and follow up different aspects of the agenda on the basis of the findings? What efforts are underway at national level to follow up on the findings of these reviews? Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Scientific and Technological Community for his statement. Now, I invite His Excellency Abdullahi Mahid, Minister of State for Environment and Energy of Maldives, to briefly respond to the question from the floor. You have the floor, Mr. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would also be pleased and very grateful for the words of appreciation coming from some of our distinguished friends from the AOSIS and SIDS Of course, we will also consider in this context Norway as one of the bigger SIDS. And I think I would like to begin with, of course, in SDG we talk about inclusiveness. So I would like to include all of my delegation members to answer questions. But I would like to begin with the one from Singapore. How would we do it? At which levels? Of course, our government is working on 3 levels, which is an island level, atoll level, and national levels. As a small country, we have a difficult task for development with being a SID. But of course, we have also graduated from LDC now. How we did it was we gave a lot of consideration for our human capital development. And I think this is the best you could do in any SIDS. And Maldives has remarkable progress in variety of areas, relatively short period of time, giving this emphasis on the development of the capital development, human resources. In early 90s, we were among one of the poorest nations. Since then, we have made remarkable progress. Our infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate have dropped significantly, while life expectancy has increased. We have achieved universal literacy. All children enjoy free education until their complete secondary schooling, and all citizens benefit from a universal health care program. As a result, the Maldives has graduated from an LDC to an MIC. The Maldives aspires to keep this momentum to become an upper MIC and beyond. Now I think the question of how we deal with the data, how we manage it, I think we came from Belize. I would ask my colleague to answer this one.
Good morning, everyone. With regard to data collection, data is a huge challenge in our aspect, and we are working on different fronts in data collection and management of data. And we are working to strengthen the administrative data as well as finding alternative data methods for data collecting, like satellite imagery, drone technology, or using big data. And for better decision making and to have more results-oriented outcomes. With regard to the question about inclusiveness and prioritizing, we are still working on developing the priorities process, and we have not completed it. And we recognize that it has to be through a consultative process and ensuring that all dimensions are integrated as well throughout this, and engagement of the stakeholder agencies, including the state agencies, private sector, the civil society, and has to be ensured in not only expressing their concerns in the process, but to be seen as a part of implementing partners of the SDGs.
I think the question we have is from our friends from Comoros. They ask us how we balance SDG Goal 13, climate action, with other SDGs. I would like to ask my colleague Maria to answer that one.
Thank you, Minister. With regard to balancing of climate change to all the aspects of SDGs, climate change is one of the priority for us, given it impacts all the elements of SDG. So we are prioritizing climate change because it provides a positive momentum, not only to implementing climate action, but also it will give a boost to implementation of other SDGs, as there is a interlinkages and interconnectedness assured within them as well. So, and we are currently developing and improving our methods for how we are engaging with the implementation as well. Thank you.
I think the question we have from Norway is how we harness and ocean resources, and I think I would like to ask my colleague Ms. Farzana to answer this one.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to thank all the distinguished colleagues who have taken interest to ask questions for us. In terms of answering Norway, as you have rightly pointed out, oceans play a central role in the economy of the Maldives, given that the two biggest industries of the country, tourism and fisheries, rely heavily on this. Therefore, our future is heavily reliant on the conservation and sustainable use of marine resources. In this regard, the government has commenced extensive efforts to conserve and preserve our oceans, and that started long before the adoption of the 2030 Agenda. Maldives has always utilized, as was shown in the presentation, we have utilized low-impact fishing methods, such as one-by-one fishing, which is sustainable, and we have refined it over time. We have taken pride in the fact that the Maldives has been independently certified as one of the cleanest and greenest countries in terms of tuna fisheries. Similarly, there has been extensive efforts made to preserve marine environment and protect the reefs, including the establishment of a network of 42 protected areas, such as the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve in Baitol. There's extensive effort to reduce marine pollution, in particular marine plastics. Since the Agenda 2030 was adopted, efforts have been taken to conserve and sustainably use and bring sustainable uses in line with the targets of SDG 14, and we aim to contribute to the full extent that we can for the realization of this goal. This was very clearly demonstrated by the voluntary commitments. The voluntary commitments from the Oceans Conference. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have, generally answered this one from the SGC on how we collect the vulnerable group and disaggregated data in our data collection. So I think we have no time to go, as Mr. President says, in detail. So thank you very much for all of your interest.
I thank His Excellency Abdullahi Mahid, Minister of State for Environment and Energy of Maldives, for the presentation. I also thank delegation for their valuable contributions. I will now briefly pause to allow the podium to be rearranged in order to take up the next voluntary national review on our program of work. I request delegates to remain seated. The meeting is adjourned.